All right. So this is episode 10 of the North West Edmonton show with me, Trevor Aboussafy. We have a very special guest today. It is Chris Miller, the wonderful and fantastic Chris Miller from Remax Real Estate. He's going to talk with us today about some of the things going on with the real estate market. How you doing today, Chris?
I'm doing great, Trevor. Thanks for having me on. And I'll just clarify, I'm at Remax Elite because real estate is actually another branch.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. I just learned something. Chris Miller of Remax Elite. I do know where your office is.
Yes.
And full disclosure for everybody watching this, Chris and I do a fair bit of work together. I do some projects for his customers, and he was my real estate agent when I bought this house and when we sold the last house. So Chris and I do have a fairly long relationship working together before this video. So I asked Chris to be on the show and just let everybody here talk about, or we're going to talk about some real estate things. And everybody is talking about how COVID is affecting the real estate market in Edmonton and how things are hot and things are not. So I thought it'd be a great opportunity to have Chris on the show. So Chris,
Yeah.
sorry?
I was going to say absolutely. And it's exciting to be part of your show. I know you've had lots of hot topics on here.
Oh, well, thanks. Yeah, we're every week we get more and more viewers. So I think the last week's episode's up to getting close to the most viewed episode yet, actually. So somewhere around 2,000 views now, which is pretty cool.
Fantastic.
So why don't we start out, Chris? Give us a little bit of your bio. Tell us who you are and where you come from and what got you to where we are today.
Yeah, you betcha. Okay, well, I'll try to keep it brief. Again, my name is Chris Miller with Remax Elite. So my location that I work out of is actually Windermere, Southwest Edmonton. But of course, as a real estate agent, most people don't know that we're actually licensed for the entire province. So I can sell and help people buy real estate all over Alberta. Okay.
Mhm.
So my career, I've been in the business for 16 years now in real estate, and I've worked in a team environment as well as a solo environment. And today I run my own team here out of Remax Elite in Edmonton, and just fantastic career being involved in helping people flourish. You know, the one thing I like about being in real estate that keeps me doing it year after year is being involved in people's dreams. Everybody wants to have a life that is, you have a house to support your dreams. You want to travel, you want to work, you want to have kids and have a family, whatever your dreams are in your life always revolves around just really loving where you live so you can have that stability to explore your dreams. So that's really the main reason that got me into real estate. I thought it would be quite interesting, not knowing anything about real estate prior to that, but I've definitely felt like that's been what's kept me here and kept me going and enjoying this career.
Cool. So how long have you been a real estate agent now?
So 16 years this summer.
Wow.
So long enough to know that it's no longer a part-time job, but I'd say it's definitely a career move. I can't actually imagine me switching after this many years in the business into doing anything else. I've not lost a zest for enjoying it, even when it's tough times in the economy or tough times with just things that are going on politically. Real estate has always been a blessing for my family, and I've been able to bless others with it.
Great. Well, you certainly took care of us when we had some troubles selling the last house and things. So
Mhm.
I will personally vouch for your ability as a full-time real estate agent. And we were talking last week, I think, and you said you'd actually had a couple of listings or buyers up in the Northwest. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I do work on the north side a fair bit. Of course, my clients take me all over the city and the bedroom communities. So I really am kind of like a specialist of a generalist, shall we say. So, what I mean by that is lots of people specialize in their neighborhood in real estate, right?
Mhm.
But as a realtor, when you get to know so many people and you have people that are all walks of life, you really can't say that you specialize in a neighborhood as your full package or booklet of business. So when you're working with people all over, yes, I can specialize in a neighborhood, but I'm still always traveling to other neighborhoods and communities because I've got people that want me to help them.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I don't think you'd well, I guess you could make a living just working. But if you told people you couldn't leave one part of town, you certainly wouldn't be able to pick up all those people that are looking to move from one part of town to another, right? So it's important to
Yeah,
have
yeah.
to have some area of expertise all over the place, right?
Well, I think part of it too, if I could just elaborate for a quick second here, Trevor,
Sure.
the age of the internet has really taken specialization in real estate on a bigger sense, to almost a global sense, where the skill set we have as a realtor or as a tradesperson, a plumber, electrician, it's like that. You can pick up your trade and you can go to any community and do the same thing. And with the
Mm.
age of the internet being so easy to gather information, but also so easy to be able to understand value in every community and every nook of each neighborhood because of what's available online for realtors as well. It really dissolves the need to be able to be a specialist in your neighborhood, because it doesn't matter if you live in Cold Lake, Alberta, or if I come up from Edmonton to help you in Cold Lake, Alberta. If I'm willing to drive and I know enough about the community, then obviously I can help you with the same professional behaviors and systems and services. So
Yeah, that
it's
makes
kind of an
sense.
interesting scenario that way.
Yeah, and you have connections to all of the information you need now for market appraisals and things like that. So you don't need to worry about knowing personally about all the houses in the neighborhood that have sold in the last little bit and all of the ins and outs. I mean, that's all accessible online now. So cool.
Right.
But
And
I
so, in other words, I wouldn't need to know the neighbors' names, but I would have the
Mhm.
information.
Yeah, right, exactly. But we are the Northwest Edmonton show, so we're gonna try to stay relevant to the people that are watching this. So I got a couple of questions I wanted to ask
Absolutely.
you that are a little more geared to our part of town. If you don't mind taking some time, we can get started on those.
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely.
So first question I wanted to ask you is from a realtor, is it realtor or realtor?
So it's actually Realtor. Yeah.
Realtor. Okay.
And that's why you see there's a lot of memes on there. Realtor is a meme.
Okay. All right. I see. Okay.
We
So
are real.
from a realtor's perspective, what makes the northwest part of town different from other parts of the city?
Well, I guess I'll first start out by saying every neighborhood has its own unique flavor, but certainly in different areas of the city, you can find there's certain amenities and there's certain luxuries and or just ways of life that you get in the community that really stand out in a lot of different areas. So when I talk about helping people on the north side, there's definitely a couple of key points that, and when I say north side, I mean north of downtown Edmonton. So basically, downtown is still south of the Yellowhead, but then you go
Right.
north of the Yellowhead, there's that divide. That pardon me, that scenario there was when you go into the north side. There's a couple of really key things that really stood out to me and stand out to me regularly. Number one is value. There's definitely something special about the north side where you can get a beautiful home, a beautiful yard. And more often than not, a lot of people that have been there since 1950, 1960, original home owners, because those neighborhoods were so sought after with the large lots and the I guess you could say the homes built in the 50s and 60s in general, they had so much character that people never wanted to leave.
Mhm.
And so when I'm talking to people about buying on the north side, there's kind of two elements. In some cases, it's not as walkable, is what we refer to, because you have shops along the industrial district. So, like 137th Ave, 132 Ave, Fort Road, go to 127th Street West. These are good examples of where there's large industrial shopping centers. But then when you get off of those strips, it's just beautiful, mostly bungalow homes, large lots, quiet streets where people do know their neighbors. And I don't know if you really recognize this yourself, Trevor, but I know some people also recognize that having a garage in the back of the home and not as your front curb appeal
Mhm.
really does elevate your know your neighbor experience, and sitting in the window and watching people walk by, people watching, people gathering. There's just something special about the north side in general that provides that.
Right. Good. Yeah, we definitely have. I have noticed that with the proximity that like the north side has to the industrial area and the historic work that was provided around the rail yards, you
Mhm.
see a lot of the stuff, the older communities were built first of all as access to that type of environment for the rail yards and things like that, and then grew beyond that. So the infrastructure, like you said, you would have walked to work at the train station and then walked home, and there's a whole bunch of houses, right, from all the way from 75th Street all the way to St. Albert Trail that are just, within 2 miles or 3 miles of the train yard. So those are the older communities. And then you've got the newer stuff that, like you said, that has the front attached garages and stuff like that. But those are those are north of 153rd and north of 167th. And,
That's
the
right.
city keeps expanding. So we got a lot, like one thing I know about paying attention to this part of town, there's really a big variation in what's available, right? There are houses in Calder that were built, around the turn of the century, like you're the beginning of the 20th century. And then there's big neighborhoods like Lauderdale and Roslyn, where most of the houses were built in the 50s and 60s. And then you've got some stuff in Castle Downs, which started in the 70s and big in the 80s. And then you've got things in Cumberland and Oxford and Carleton and all of these other communities that are now being built even farther north that were being built through the 90s and the 2000s and even into the 2010s, and we're still building houses. So there's a lot of variety up here, but all of that infrastructure starts and it kind of accumulates from that original sense of people needing to work at the rail yard in the industrial area and being able to get to there easily and transport in and out. So I would say you're right.
As well.
Yeah, Fort Road.
Historic Fort Road. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so we do not have like the walkability, like you said, that some other places like downtown would have, or even Old Strathcona, or some of the more
like White Ave.
Yeah, White Ave. Yeah, even if you had like a planned newer community like Summerside or something like that, where you have a lot of things to do and there's the lake, there's not a lot of that on the north side, but you do get great value. And that's why, realistically, that's why I moved to the north side many years ago, was just because the houses were less expensive. So why not?
Totally.
Why not?
And if I could just add a bit to that real quick here too, Trevor, you might have caught on my YouTube channel as well. We actually just did a recent video of a client who just purchased a home in Kensington, just west of you.
Oh, yeah.
And just going through the history. Like, I love people's history and the history of the city. So it was quite good because we were sharing a little bit of information about how Calder used to be the village of Calder. And then Kensington was, okay, we're going to open up a new neighborhood in the 50s and 60s, just north of the village of Calder. So you're no longer in the Edmonton core. And now Kensington is this great, beautiful community on 127th Street here, north of the Yellowhead.
Yeah,
and then all of a sudden,
I love Kensington. There's a lot of like little independent little stores in there and schools, and there's parks, and Kensington's a fantastic community.
That's right. That's right. And so we were going into in the YouTube video there just a little bit about the fact that 137th Ave in the 70s was farmland. It was still the farthest northern part of the city. So since the 70s in our lifetime, we've seen 137th all the way to the north end of the Henday, and like you said, 170th Avenue. So it's interesting how all of that has been in the last 30 years.
Yeah, it's when I was a kid, this is funny too, like, so not relevant to the north side, but when I was a kid and just got my driver's license, a friend of mine lived on a farm that bordered Ellerslie Road. And we used to drive, and it was a dirt road in front of his farm. So we used to have to drive out to his place and take a dirt road, which was Ellerslie, and ride out there. And my dad used to, and I say, well, we got to go all the way out to Ellerslie Road to see this guy. And my dad said, oh, when I was a kid, Argyle Road was that part of town, was that like dirt road on the edge of town with the farming. And this is the same thing here. 137th Avenue was the equivalent. Now we're way past that on the north side. We're way past Ellerslie Road. Like, you're barely even on the south side if you're on Ellerslie Road now.
Yeah. You're like, oh yeah, you're kind of in a good neighborhood on the south. That's kind of south central.
Yeah. Right.
So just a little touch, I guess, is that I love the north side history, the culture that you can actually dig up if you really like to know about the community.
Yeah, that is really cool. I agree with that. Yeah, for sure. Are there any specific challenges or benefits when you're dealing with buyers or sellers in the Northwest?
I think basically we have two kind of types of, I wouldn't say economic status, but demographic status. You know, you've got a lot of first time buyers purchasing homes.
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly enough, you've got a lot of seniors selling homes.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, you've got that transition period where people that are saying, I don't want to buy a condominium, I'd prefer to buy a house.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're like, okay, if I'm going to buy a house, I want to go to a house. It might need a little bit of work, but I'd love to have grandma and grandpa's house, you know, something that's well maintained. They took care of the roof, they took care of the furnace, they took care. It's okay if it looks like 1960 or even 1970, because we know it's going to be polished. You could eat off the floor, nothing's broken.
Mm-hmm.
So I love shopping what we would refer to as an estate sale property on the north side, because there's lots of transition of seniors on the north side that have been in their home for 50 years, 40, 50 years. And they're
Yeah,
now selling to this younger couple, younger singles that are buying their first home. So like challenges, pros and cons. That's kind of the biggest thing that I see on the north side.
that's cool. Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. My neighbor on the one side, he's the second owner, but he's now lived in the same house for 45 years.
Right.
Um,
And the
and
second,
then he's the second owner. Yeah, he bought the house when it was like 3 or 4 years old from the first owner. Guy across, there's a guy that lives across the alley and down a few houses. I was talking to him, and his dad built the house he grew up in, which was on the other side of the cul-de-sac from the house he now lives in. So he says he's only moved once in his entire life, and it was 180 feet.
yeah, across the road. Yeah.
He moved out of his dad. He bought the house across the street from his dad and moved moved once.
Yeah. And it's funny you bring that up too. I'm actually amazed at how much families have grown up. I've sold homes in Lauderdale and Kensington, and you know, good examples of things that I remember. People like, well, I'm selling mom and dad's home. And
Hmm.
they're like, but you know, I live 4 blocks away and my sister lives 6 blocks away. And I
Hmm.
really noticed that on the other side, like people really don't move too far from where they grew up.
No, when you got a great community with lots of like, my house is within walking distance of like 4 parks. So if you
Mhm.
got a young family, like what's better than that? I got 2 schools that are within walking distance of my house and 4 parks. I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah.
You don't get that in a lot of newer places. So. Cool. Yeah, I like good answers so far, Chris. Thank you. You seem to definitely know what's going on in my neck of the woods for sure.
I love it.
Um, when you're working with a buyer,
Mhm.
what are the things you tell people about Northwest Edmonton if they're considering moving here but don't know much about our community?
It's good, actually. I think, you know, as you've experienced in the past, I really focus a lot when I'm working with people purchasing a home is for them to paint a picture for me what they want their day-to-day life to look like. Because when you're purchasing a home, it's not about four walls and how many bedrooms and bathrooms. It really is like, well, I like to sit in my living room and cuddle with my wife, or have a playground for the kids to just be, I can look out the window and see them playing across the street. And really, when people are painting that picture of what they want their life to look like, I actually have really gotten to know each of the feelings, the community feel of each neighborhood, to be able to line people up 99% of the time when people describe to me what they want for a day-to-day life actually fits a community. And it's kind of fascinating for me. So when people are telling me they want to live on the north side, they're not actually saying they want to live on the north side. They're saying this is the kind of day-to-day life. I would like to bike to work, or you know, I'd like to live close to a recreation facility that's not totally overcrowded, you know, small streets, big trucks, you know, that's just too
Hmm.
condensed.
Hmm.
I'd love to live in a place that feels like I could grow and I could plant a garden and I could, you know, take my kids to the library. And it's not necessarily a short walk, but it's something that's an adventure. You know, I'm not feeling like I'm just living in my four walls all the time and not knowing my neighbor. So predominantly, I'd say it's that personality that people seek and that community on the north side in general. Again, you're looking at, you know, pretty much from Grote Road all the way to Fort Road. So that's east to west,
Hmm.
and essentially north of the Yellowhead, right?
Right.
Um, that's that kind of scenario where people really feel that a lot up until you get into the newer neighborhoods in 153rd Ave and North, where they get
Hmm.
that front attached garage, smaller streets, but bigger shops for people to hang out at Starbucks. Again, that's a
Right.
personality, right?
Yeah.
So I really do feel like that's the larger point of it is people don't say, I want to live on the north side. They say, I want to live in this kind of community. Mhm.
Well, I definitely, I moved to the north side for the lower housing prices, and I stayed for the community. And
Right.
I,
And it's interesting demographic, right? The prices do really reflect because the houses are smaller, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, looking at 1,000 square foot bungalow is a pretty typical property. You go into a lot of other neighborhoods, they're 1,200 to 1,400 square foot, or stacks and stacks of 2 stories. You know, and a lot
Mhm.
of people don't like 2 stories.
I like a little house. It's easier to keep clean.
Mhm. Actually, if I could just
When-
extend on that, it just
Yeah.
tweaked me as well. That's one of the things I could refer to a lot. These communities on the north side, they're called communities where you can age into them. And I
Mhm.
think that's important too, is it gives people that feeling I don't have to move for 30 years because I'm not going to have to downsize or I'm not going to have to upsize. If the homes are big enough to raise a family or do what you like, small enough to feel like you can be 60, 70, 80 years old and still fending for yourself.
Yeah, that's exactly the way I feel about my house. So,
Mhm.
I mean, when we were looking for a house, I suppose we hit it right on the nail of the head there, right? We've got a house that's big enough that our family can, we've got room in the yard to roam around. The kids can explore the neighborhood. We've got 3 bedrooms and we've got enough space, but it's small enough to keep clean. And when things break, I don't need to worry about the jobs piling up. And, if I'm 70 or 80 years old, I'll easily be able to still be in this house. So yeah, it's a
Totally.
completely understand that. That's a good point.
And as you experienced, that's the gentleman we purchased your house from. That
Oh
was
yeah.
who lived there.
Well,
Mhm.
yeah, he was because it was an estate sale too. So he had lived in this house.
His early 70s, his dad.
Yeah, I think he bought it in the early 60s.
Was it
And
60s?
and he lived here until 2017 or something. So he was in this house for
Mhm.
45 or 50 years too. And
Yeah.
his kids grew up in the house, right? Like it was the same thing. Dad had
Yeah.
passed on and they were selling dad's house.
Yeah.
But I happen to know that his son, who we were dealing with on the purchase of the house, only lives like 3 miles away.
Right.
He lives in a newer
Very close.
neighborhood, but he
Yeah.
didn't move that far, right?
Mhm.
All right, let's the next question here. When you're working with the buyer, what do we oh yes, we talked about that. Okay. If someone's thinking of selling their house in the Northwest, what's the most important things to know or consider before they call an agent?
It's a good question. I think, it's not necessarily just specific to the north side, but I think in general, when people are looking at selling their home, really that's when you say, okay, I want to hire a professional to do it for me. There really isn't anything a homeowner should really have to do ahead of time of meeting the agent like myself. So I'm going to come in right from the planning stage. So if I'm going to come in and going to go, here's all the questions you're probably going to have to answer. You don't even have to know what questions to ask because I probably have them all written down already. So I think the key thing is most people just need to do two things because the agent, of course, like myself, I love to go and say, well, maybe you should paint, maybe you should do some shampooing of the carpets. And I can totally go in and say, you've done nothing yet. Let me give you guidance on what to do and what not to do, where it's going to be money well spent, so to speak.
Mhm.
But the two things I can't do for you that are great to have when you're going to meet me and think about selling is have an up to date tax assessment. So you know what your house value appears to be for the city taxes, not because it's based on value, but just so that you have an understanding of what this expectation of the community is. And then, secondly, if you still have a mortgage on your home, then it's really important to contact your lender and say, if I bought my house today or sold my house today and bought out my mortgage, I paid everything off, what
Mm.
is the number I would have to write a check for? Okay,
Right.
that's your balance of your mortgage, but potentially if you're in a 5-year mortgage still and there's 3 years left over, there might even be some prepayment penalties that
Mm.
you'll have to engage in and consider. So when I tell people that stuff I can't do for you, but at the same time you can do it in advance, is to say, well, if I know kind of what the city thinks my house is worth, the tax assessment, and I know what the check is, regardless of the
Mhm.
number, big or small, I know what the check is that I'm going to have to write to the bank to make this paid down to zero, that's a great starting point. Really
Good.
simple, two things to keep in mind. And that's really a lot of your planning information that you can start and build from there.
Yeah, that's great advice. I think a lot of people call their agent with neither of those things in mind, right? They don't know what the house is worth. They don't really know what they owe on it, and then they get shocked when the real estate agent tells them, or I guess, sorry, realtor, real estate agent is an antiquated term now. I think, is that right?
Sorry, say it again. I'm not sure what.
I keep saying real estate agent, but I think that's an antiquated term. So I'm gonna, if I say
Oh,
it and I mean
yes.
realtor, please
Yeah.
correct me.
Real estate agent is acceptable. Realtor is very acceptable. That's actually the trademark word. The easiest thing people actually refer to us now is you can just say agent or associate.
Okay. All right. So before you, if I think a lot of people, they have some dream in their head about what they think their house might be worth without having, if they're not paying attention to what the real estate market's been doing, they really might have no idea. But the I've always found when I've been dealing with, because I work in construction, right? So we're constantly talking about what the value of projects are relative to resale and
Mhm.
adding costs to houses and how to get them sold and things like that. So
Yeah.
I think even if you look, you're right. If you look at what the tax assessment is, it at least puts you in the right ballpark. It might not be 100% accurate, but you're not going to be off by tens of thousands of dollars usually, right? The city's pretty good at getting those pretty close, right?
Well, if I could actually just reiterate, there's one factor most people don't realize about the city, and that is a lot of it is guesswork, right? If you have lived in your home for 6 months and you just bought it, the
Mm-hmm.
city knows that transaction happened recently. So that tax assessment is going to be very close because they're basing it on what you paid. Now imagine though, you're buying a house from somebody who bought the house 40 years ago. The city's probably never gone step foot in that home. They only know the neighborhood sales in general. They don't know if you've upgraded smaller things like put in new kitchen cabinets, but they'll know if you like blew out a wall and did a structural change, right? Because you had to
Right.
get a permit. So, barring there's been structural changes to your home, you can imagine actually the city can be sometimes really far off because
Oh.
they haven't been in your home for 40 years and they don't know that you've still replaced the roof and you've still put a new kitchen in, or your neighbor has done nothing but
Mm-hmm.
they've spit polished and cleaned every detail every day for 30 years. So that
Right.
value is also different than a teardown scenario.
Yeah.
So really when it comes down to it, just having the ballpark, like I've seen seniors get taken advantage of because they go, oh, my house is worth that much. The tax assessment was way less than that. Great,
Mm.
I'll take your money. On this flip side, I've seen people say, well, my house says it's worth $400,000. And they have someone come in and go, well, based on all these sales, the average in your neighborhood and for a home like yours is selling for 275, and they get completely upset. Right.
Mm.
So there's definitely an acid test there to kind of say, you still need more information from your professional, whether it be me or another one, but we can actually have a starting point, a conversation. If you're going to be really upset or really excited from the tax assessment, at least then you got that out of the way before you're sitting at the table.
Okay, good. Good. Yeah. All right, let's see. What was the next question? Are there any secrets you're willing to share about getting a great deal on a great house when you're buying one?
No, actually, I have a lot of secrets, as you've experienced just in conversations we've had. But I guess if I was to just focus on a couple things that people don't realize, um, the diamond in the rough is a true secret. It's not actually such a philosophy that is kind of a book, a fictitious situation. It's if you can go into a home and see that something needs paint and something needs flooring, but with those things haven't been done, the house would be completely refaced and just look so different. That's a diamond in a rough that you can typically find as this is a great deal because I'm going to be able to buy a home that needs very little, but it's going to make such an impact on the value
Mhm.
once it's done. Vice versa, you go into a home that looks beautiful, it's pretty, it's got nice new kitchen, but then you go, well, the roof is 25 years old and the furnace is 30 years old and the plumbing looks like it's leaking everywhere, but it's
Mhm.
pretty. Like that's not something I would suggest is a good deal. So I think what it really comes down to it is finding a good deal has two elements. It's like a property might be vacant and no one's living there, and the seller's very motivated because it needs a little bit of work and no one wants to buy anything with work. And the seller has this empty property. They don't want to hold on to
except
it.
except me. I was looking for a house that needed to be torn down. So
Yes. But you already had those key elements of how to find a good deal. So that's why you were steering
right.
that.
Yeah.
So that's one thing is, finding a motivated seller and
Hmm.
for the right property that might be empty is one, but also finding the properties that actually superficially look like they need work, but structurally and physically, you're like, nah, this is going to be, this is we call it a quick flip. You can go in,
Hmm.
paint it, put new flooring, put new door handles on everything, and all of a sudden it looks like a different house.
Right. I know we had gone through that when we were looking for this house, or when we
Mm.
were looking and we found this house. Um, I don't know if you remember, I think we we'd find a listing, write an offer that day because of the specifically what you're saying. Like we were looking for something that was really ugly but had potential
Mhm.
to be fixed.
Mhm.
And by the time we'd show up like 2 hours later, they'd have already sold the house after it had been on. So those,
Yeah.
I tell everybody, if you find that gem, you got to jump on it, right? If there's something that's really good that you don't have to put a lot of money in and meets all of your criteria, just
Mhm.
go get it, because there's a lot of stuff out there that is not good and you'll see it over and over and over again. So find that diamond in the rough. I like it. And that's a good point.
Well, can I just give you a good example? I actually showed a
Mhm.
home last night in Baldwin, not far from you.
Mhm.
And the house, you could tell it was like grandma and grandpa's house. I mean, they changed the smoke detectors to brand new, but the house looked like 1960, but it had a brand new smoke detector. You're like, these people actually cared about the details. They had
Mhm.
new windows, they had a new roof, they had a new furnace, they had new smoke detectors. They had all this beautiful spit polished clean flooring, but it looked like 1965. And so we're
Right.
looking at this house and I'm like, well, not only is the price good, a good deal is also not paying for someone else's renovations. And
Mhm.
so in that situation, they did all the expensive stuff. Love these little seniors who just like, they're so careful about how they spend their money. Let's do the roof, that's important. Let's do the windows, that's important. But they don't do anything that's pretty. They do the stuff that's the meat and the potatoes.
Right.
That's the diamond in the rough. That's like, oh my goodness, these people wanted to live in a nice home, but they didn't care what it looked
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
superficially. They weren't wowed by stainless steel appliances and granite countertops.
It reminds me of a story. Like smoke detectors are such a little tiny detail, right? That
Mhm.
only the people who are critically focused on maintaining their home are going to notice, aged smoke detectors. And it reminds me of a story my dad likes to tell me about how their MasterCard had done a survey about what was the biggest predictors of what people would buy if they were going to pay their credit card bill on time. And the number one thing that people bought that would indicate that they were going to pay their credit card was those little like chair protectors for the bottoms of your kitchen
Oh
chairs,
yeah,
the little felt pads.
yeah.
And the theory was is that if you were concerned enough to save your floors from dragging chairs around, you were probably going to pay your credit card bill. And that's the same thing. If you're concerned enough about new smoke detectors in the house, you're probably going to be concerned enough about taking care of all that other little tiny maintenance stuff that you'd like, putting a bead of silicone there or fixing a leaky eaves trough over there, and those things that add up to years of depreciation and maintenance and deferred maintenance, right? So I like that
Well,
smoke detector tip. That's a good one on.
yeah. And another tip that I say is I don't just look at smoke detectors too, but a tip as both a selling agent where I'm helping someone sell, but also buying agent. When you're going into someone's home, if you can walk into the furnace room and
Mhm.
the furnace on the top and the hot water tank on the top are clean with no dust, you likely came across a homeowner who knows how to maintain their home, because the furnace room is the last room to go in when there's
Mhm.
something that's needing done. And if they've taken the time to go into the furnace room and wipe down the appliances, you got to keep her.
Yeah, great. That's a great little tip there. I like it. So that reminds me, I got to go clean my furnace room now. What was the next question? What secrets for sellers to get the most out of selling their property? So we kind of touched, I mean, it's going to be sort of the same thing for finding a diamond in the rough as finding a good seller. But if you've got a decent home you're trying to get top dollar for and get everything you need out of the sale, what's your big tips for doing that?
Well, I have two tips, Trevor, and I think the two tips that I like to share with people. I mean, you could spend lots and lots of money on making the home much more modern, much more clean and tidy, and getting it really ready for sale. But the things I find are the most bang for your buck. Like you talk about doing a renovation and maybe only getting 60 or 70% back in the money that you spent. The things I find is 200 and 300 fold is repairs and maintenance. You
Mhm.
can spend $500 on a handyman service to come and fix everything. The squeaky door, the door handle that kind of falls off, the light switch that flickers when you're trying to turn it on and the light never really catches,
Mhm.
the dust on the ceiling fan that's cleaned off. You could pay that $500 handyman service to come in and just say, if there's something that looks broken, fix it, and that will, in honest to goodness, result likely in thousands of dollars in demand from a buyer saying, there's nothing broken here. How could I
Mhm.
possibly not pay them top dollar? I'm going to walk in, even if it's got pink countertops from 1993. There's nothing here that's broken. How could I
Right.
possibly think this is not a good opportunity? So that's your best bang for your buck, I think, is hiring a handyman to literally walk around the house and just fix stuff that's broken or dirty and needs cleaning.
Right. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. We've since I mentioned that we've talked to before, that's been a lot of the things that we do is I'll go in and I'll fix stuff up for your clients, and a broken light switch or patch a wall, and do quick little repair stuff. That's a lot of what we do together. And I know when I've been always looking at, even if it's not buying, if it's renting a property and you go look at it and you open, one of the first things you do is walk into the kitchen and start opening drawers. Well, if the drawers fall off the track, like, oh, I
Yeah.
don't want to rent this place anymore. It's falling apart. That $10 fix of fixing the drawer can
Mhm.
make the difference on whether you sell the house or you rent the house or whatever it is that you do. So yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think on a larger level, sorry, a larger scale, but still not overly going overboard with spending money, is a coat of paint. It's amazing how much I go into places and every room, has been tailored to each member in the family, right? This room is pink. This room is light blue. This room is peach. This room is nice and beige. This is the neutral mom and dad hangout in here. The basement's purple and black stars.
Hmm.
And
Right.
when you can bring continuity to a home, so you can have every room feel like you're walking from one room to the next, but it feels the same room,
Hmm.
then you have that flow. So continuity and flow I find are really interchangeable. If you walk from one room that's kind of a peach yellow and then you go to a brand new modern kitchen and it's a beigey blue color that looks beautiful, it's just so different than that peachy yellow bathroom. It makes you feel like something's not renovated, right?
Hmm.
So I
Yeah.
feel like
Good point.
continuity in a home is a really big one to spend money to paint your entire house might be a few $1,000s. But at the same time, it's amazing how much that translates into people feeling like that home is move-in ready.
Yeah. Good point. I like, maybe I'll, no, I'm not the real estate expert, but that's you. Um, when people are asking me what they can do to clean up the house, I often tell them, like,
Mhm.
even if you just use the same color, if your house hasn't been painted in 25 years, if you put a fresh coat, the same color on the wall, it's easy enough to do. But it just makes everything look fresh and bright and new and clean, makes such a huge difference. And the other thing is painting the ceilings. Like
Mhm.
how many houses do you know where, it's got popcorn texture on the ceiling, and maybe if grandma and grandpa lived there, maybe they smoked or not, or maybe they did in the 70s, or ceilings yellow over time. And if it hasn't been painted for 20 or 30 years, putting a coat of white paint on a ceiling brightens a room up so much that
Mhm.
even if you can't afford to paint the walls, it,
Right.
just
Yeah.
if you paint the ceiling, it makes the whole house look so much better. And it's one of those little like subliminal things that you don't notice it, but when you walk in a house where the ceilings are yellow,
Mhm.
it just doesn't feel good. But when you walk in and the ceilings are nice and bright, you feel immediately uplifted and the house feels brighter and cleaner. So I don't know. That's my opinion. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. I think lighting is everything. And I think that's one of the things people get wrong or they just don't really think too much about either is even things like window coverings.
Mhm.
If you've got 7 or 8 blinds in your home and 3 of them are broken, having window coverings that people can't see the light come in, but they're closed because they don't open, or they're open, but you can tell they're broken and they don't go up and down.
Mhm.
Those little things that people are like, oh, well, this needs work. Oh, there's not very much light in here. I wish there was more light in here because the blind isn't actually open. Right. So
That goes
those
back to
little,
having everything fixed too, when right?
yeah, they relate to each other. Yeah. Yeah.
Great. So I've been seeing a lot of houses we were talking about the older neighborhoods here, your Lauderdale, Roslyn, Calder, Athlone, Kensington, Wellington, the older neighborhoods. A lot of them are getting fixed up, and there's a fair bit of infill going on, which
Mhm.
I think is somewhat new to this. Like we've heard a lot about infill around the
Yeah.
university area and White Ave and things like that, but I'm starting to see a lot more of it happen. 2 blocks away from me, they're putting up a brand new, or not 2 blocks, 2 houses down,
Mhm.
putting up a brand new duplex.
Mhm.
How do you see that? What are your thoughts on the northwest area of town as a potential investment area or income property?
Yeah. Absolutely. I think there's 2 ways to look at it. So when we see an area, just terminology wise, we see an area getting revitalized and brought in new, but also it gets more expensive because now you've got new construction going on. Obviously, there's costs associated with that. We call that gentrification, right? So if a neighborhood is going and is becoming more gentrified, okay, means that there's higher, more expensive properties coming up. And so that little bungalow is very common in the neighborhood, but now it's beside a 2-story duplex. And that 2-story duplex, each side of those duplexes might be selling for as much as that little bungalow, even though you're only buying half of a house, right?
Mhm.
And that's a problem for a lot of neighborhoods when they get a little bit out of whack. So, for example, you go to the university of any city, university areas tend to be super expensive lots with 50s and 60s or older houses. And so when they tear that house down and they build this new duplex and or 2 homes on the same lot, you find that gentrification is more extreme. Now you're taking that $600,000 bungalow and you're spending $900,000 on half a house. So
Right.
that's to the extreme level of gentrification, is when you see that the prices go through the roof because it's brand new, high end, fancy construction. That's not what the north side usually sees and or what I see happening. But what I do see happening is people say, you know what, I want to live next door to mom and dad, or I want to have a property that I can feel like I don't know how to swing a hammer, but I
Mhm.
want to still live in something that I don't feel like needs everything because I'm going to have to pay someone to do it.
Right.
That particular person and or family might say, you know what, I can afford the same 300, $400,000 for a house. I don't mind living in a duplex because I'm still going to get a nice size yard. I'm still going to get a nice front porch. I'm not going to have my garage attached to the front. And because they now maybe have a house beside them, they're sacrificing the larger lot for something that's more amenable to their skill set. And so they're happy to see that I could choose a bungalow with a larger yard, maybe with some renos, or I could choose this 2-story duplex. And they're happy as a cucumber. They can see that that lifestyle choice is nice that they still have that. That's difficult when someone doesn't know how to swing a hammer and or fix anything because that's not the lifestyle they lead. It's really
Mhm.
hard for them to be satisfied with maybe living on the north side when they do see that there's a lot of those homes that do need some updating. Yeah.
Okay.
So
So
in a nutshell, I'll say the north side is not gentrifying, but it's definitely becoming a little bit more eclectic and there's some more infill opportunities because also the land is cheaper there. So even if a house does need to be torn down, you're not spending five or $600,000 on that and then tearing it down.
yeah, I know the place next to me, the house had been a rental for a really long time, and it had just become just to the point where it had been run down. It was owned by a real estate investment company, and they just didn't put any maintenance into it. It was just, lines on a spreadsheet, and
Mhm.
it became unrentable and it got condemned. It was kind of the last house on the street that was ugly.
Okay.
My house was ugly when we bought it, and that house was really ugly. And everybody else said, there's some new siding on this side. And then the guy next door, he's put new siding on his place and he's maintained it. And, somebody else had painted and put a new porch on down the street and fixed things up or put in planters or whatever. So that was kind of the last place. But I looked at it when it's just after we moved in, and there hadn't been anybody. I heard from the neighbors there hadn't been anybody in it in 3 years.
Okay.
And I looked at it and I was like, if that's going to get torn down, somebody's going to tear that down. So infill can be, in my opinion, like just sort of some of the natural aging process of a neighborhood. You're going to get old houses that can't be fixed or aren't worth fixing, and then somebody's going to tear them down and build something new, and that might be a duplex or not. But it's not, a couple of years ago, I would drive through the university and it was like 2 houses on every block were being subdivided into skinnies. And you're definitely right. You're not seeing that here, even though there are some infills, and every once in a while a house will get torn down and a duplex will be built. But you're right. It's a lot more of, you walk past the place and then, you know what? Oh, there's new windows in that house, or they repainted the outside of the house, or they put in a new deck or a new roof, for if something is a little bit run down, they're fixing it up. So I think that's a lot of it. You're getting a lot of those folks that are aging out of their homes, and a younger crowd that wants that house that they don't have to fully renovate or moving back in, and they're the ones that are doing those little minor fixes and things like that and making them look beautiful again.
Yeah, and you actually make a good point too. Some of the stuff that you're talking about too, Trevor, I think is interesting that those are usually contracted jobs. Most people don't install their own windows.
Oh
In
yeah.
one afternoon, a company comes in, takes out the old ones, puts in the new ones. They come back the next day, they trim them all out, make it look pretty.
Mm-hmm.
In one day, company comes, strips off the shingles, comes back the next day, puts new shingles on. These larger ticket items that are expensive, they're also usually not somebody doing it themselves. So the good part is if there is somebody that has a little bit of cash to do the curb appeal stuff, the stuff that's the bigger ticket items, at least they don't have to feel overwhelmed with having to do it themselves because they're mostly one-day jobs.
Right. Well,
Mhm.
that's a good point. I'm a carpenter, and I'm perfectly capable of installing windows. But when we were doing this place, I paid the window guys to do the windows, because
Mhm.
that's a lot of specialized work that I'm not,
Mhm.
like, I could have done it, but it probably would have taken me twice as long as the window guys who do it every single day. So it just completely made sense for me, even me as somebody who was capable of doing the work and knew how to do it and had
Mhm.
all the tools. Boy, it's the same thing with the roof. I wouldn't mess around stripping my shingles off, and I'd find a roofing contractor and say, hey, you go do that. I'll go do something else that I can earn money at, and pay that guy to redo the roof. Because it's just, if it some of those specialty big ticket things like that, you really don't want to mess around paying a handyman or your neighbor or your cousin to do it, is it'll just end up costing you more money in the end. I had a friend of mine actually a few years ago. He asked me if I would reshingle his house for him, and I said no. And he said, "Oh, but Trev, I want you to do it." I want to make sure it's a good job. I said, "Well, I'll refer a roofer to you that I know does a good job, and he'll be half the price of me."
Right.
He's like, "Oh, come on, why would it be half the price?" Well, because he does it every day.
Yeah. Efficiencies, the right tools.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you got the right tools, you're set up, you know exactly what he's going to run into. And it's going to get done. And I just don't have
Mhm.
everything to be specialized into that trade, whether it's windows or roofs or whatever. I can fix them. And if you had one window, I'd probably do it. But if you're doing a whole house worth of windows, yeah, could hire the
Yeah.
window guy.
Mhm.
Yeah, good point.
So can I just actually say you mentioned something really important to me in terms of like when I'm helping someone sell a home and you've experienced that with me as well, is the one thing that I find that I'm most successful with in terms of like helping people figure out, okay, how do I know if I'm doing everything I can to sell my home for the most money? And believe it or not, I find that selling bedrooms and bathrooms never really gets a lot of interest, but selling the personality and the feel of a home, like you're going to live, you're going to enjoy this fireplace nook, you're going to be able to like really help people feel like what it's like to live and reside in that home, because you
Mhm.
can express the personality of the life you're going to have when you're sitting in that home. I feel has actually been a large part of what's easy to do in homes on the north side, and
Mhm.
or homes in general that have the beautiful trees and the large lots, because it really comes down to being able to get someone to be excited about wanting to check out your house because it's a decent home, but because it's in an area that they could see themselves enjoying every day. And it's not about, I want 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. That's a 10-second conversation for everybody.
Right.
Yeah,
You can get that by looking at the listing sheet too, right?
that's right.
Yeah.
And a home is
You
much
made
more
a
than the details. Yeah.
good point there. I get a lot of questions about people call me and say, well, Trev, we're thinking about selling our house, and um and we want to fix this, that, and the other thing. Like, oh, we want to put a deck on because we think that's going to add to, this, or we want to do an addition because we don't think the house is big enough for the market or whatever. And I don't know if that comes from watching too much HGTV or having too many like armchair quarterbacks trying to tell them how to sell their house. But I always tell people, like, before we even talk about what the cost of these renos are, if your plan is to sell the home, you need to talk to a real estate agent you need to talk to an agent first,
Mhm.
because I can tell you what a new deck's going to cost, but I'm pretty sure that's not going to add the resale value to this house that you think it is, right? Or maybe it will, but you need to talk to somebody who understands the market in your neighborhood first, before, and what buyers are willing to pay for before we go through even, well, is it a good idea to build a deck? Is it a good, but we can always, and that's where I think you really have a special eye, is when you can come in and say, like, oh, well, we fix this, fix that. Maybe if we did this, we can kind of play around with things a little bit. And it's not just, well, renovate the bathroom, put granite countertops on the kitchen, um, you know, replace the furnace, because every new buyer wants a new furnace, right? It's not that simple. And that's really where people need to, if they're thinking about selling, even if they're get ready to sell,
Yeah.
right? Like, you still need to talk to a realtor before you start spending any money on that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you're making a plan. And so just to reiterate that too, it's kind of funny stories that I've had on a regular basis just with different people, right? Someone says, well,
Mhm.
I have all brand new granite countertops. Isn't it beautiful? And you're like, well, your house is white and you picked tiger stripe orange granite counters. I'm not really sure that that's going to appeal to the buyer,
Yeah.
but I really am excited that you have nice new countertops. And that's a
Yeah.
hard conversation to have with people after the fact. But it's
I,
important that some people just don't get that part of it. They just go, we got all new cupboards and we got all new granite countertops. And so a funny thing is, just as another tip, we're talking about tricks and tips and north side and community. One of the things I can tell you, Trevor, that we may have come up in conversation, but when someone's looking at thinking about selling their home, a little activity that I like to do with people is to say, describe who you were when you bought this home.
mm,
So if you bought this home as a single person or a young couple starting a family, think about this. You're likely going to sell your home to someone who was like you when you bought it.
good point.
Because
Yeah.
if it appealed to you at that stage in your life, you don't want to appeal to people that are not in that stage of their life. You want to appeal to the same kind of person.
Hmm.
Now, there's a little bit of variance there. Lots of walks of life might like the same thing. But as a little fun game that I like to do essentially, but it's just more targeting, it's like understanding the marketing principles, is if you bought a 1 bedroom luxury bungalow, you're not going to sell to a family with 3 children.
Right.
You're going to sell to a someone who wants a 1 bedroom luxury bungalow. the same state of life, the same personality-ish. So it's an interesting activity that I do with everybody is, when you're going to sell your home, think about who you were when you bought it. And that's what you should focus on to make your home feel like that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely right. I like picking on granite countertops. That's a great point. And it's funny what people do as they grow in a home, right? Like if you bought an older home and it was, grandma's house at the time and it needed new countertops. And I've run into this. It's my biggest pet peeve. People will call me and they say, we want the cabinets replaced. We just paid 2 years ago $5,000 for these brand new granite countertops. So we need something that fits under the granite. And I'm like, there's not a contractor in the world is going to pull that granite off and guarantee that it's going to go back on. So
Right.
you now have wasted the money of putting granite in because you skipped the step of fixing the cabinets first.
Right.
So
Yeah.
then we usually just end up painting the cabinets in that case. But it's always funny to me when I see like 50-year-old cabinets with these brand new gleaming granite countertops on it, and they're like, oh well, we thought we needed granite countertops because that would appeal. I was like, no, it looks like you put a really expensive band-aid on a bad situation here.
Right. And you actually just pointed out a really, really good way to check if something's a quick splash and dash, as we call
Mhm.
it. Someone wanted to come in, do a couple of small repairs and maintenance and try to flip it for more money. That's
Mhm.
one indication you can kind of see that that's a bit of a flip situation sometimes.
Absolutely. Okay, let's see. I wanted to ask you real quick before we finish up here.
Mhm.
Income properties. I mean, I'm putting a suite in my basement, and I know a lot of people that are talking about doing that. And there are a lot of rental properties on the north side too. What's your kind of thoughts about renovating and putting in, say, a mortgage helper into your basement? Is that a good idea on the north side or not such a good idea?
I would have to back it up a bit more and say I wouldn't want to just blanket everybody with that's a good idea or a bad idea, because I really think the idea of having a rental suite or an available separate suite in your home for someone else to enjoy the space privately is usually geared toward a financial decision or a family connection. So when someone says, I would really love grandma and grandpa to live with us, and they can't really do stairs, so we want them to live on the main floor, we're going to live in the basement. So we're going to do a suite for ourselves. Well, obviously, that's not something that's a positive or negative investment concept. That's a family need.
Mhm.
And vice versa. Someone says, I'd really love to live in this house. I can't afford to live in a house that's this nice. It's 425,000 maybe, or 385,000, and it's got a lot of updates, but it has a suite in the basement. So for me to get in this neighborhood, because I don't want to buy a little 600 square foot house or a house that needs a lot of work, I can live with someone living in the basement suite and paying some of my mortgage
Mhm.
because I need that right now to qualify. So for someone who's making both of those decisions, it actually has nothing to do with whether it's a good investment or bad investment. There's a need for that for their life to work. Okay. So what I always tell people is if you're looking at trying to build your portfolio, I'd love to live in my home. And when it's time for me to move, I'd love to know that I never have to sell this home, because building my wealth through real estate is a real thing you can do. And many people do that. They have other investments, but you can own more than one property if you set yourself up that way. And so a portfolio based concept is starting with my own home, building it into a suite, and then transitioning into now I feel like I can afford a little bit more of a bigger home, or I would love to move 2 blocks over to that quiet cul-de-sac that I couldn't afford when I
Mhm.
actually bought this home. Now I can, because I'm in a career that's better. I make a bit more money. Now I'm going to convert this home to an asset that provides me wealth and income, or at least just pays for itself, so that I can now live the life that I had a goal of living, but I couldn't quite afford it, 5 years ago. So does that answer your question maybe a little bit more
Yeah.
specific to
So
an individual?
you're saying that the the north side isn't specifically a positive or negative. It's really an individual decision you have to make based on what your goals are, right?
I think so. And when you see properties that are advertising, this is a separate suite in the basement, legal suite in the basement. Yes, those fetch more money because they are actually, two living quarters. That does fetch income. But I wouldn't suggest to somebody they do that on purpose for the reason of selling or for the reason to say, well, I should just do it because it says I can do it. But it's those properties when they come up for sale, they attract other investors. So now you have
Right.
this investment. Now you can sell it to another investor. And so there's definitely a transition or a transaction way to make that be the goal, but it
Yeah,
shouldn't be, it shouldn't be a carte blanche. We're going to do this now. Our house is worth more because that's too short sighted.
absolutely. I think that's completely correct because I've if you're putting a legal suite in, there is a lot of hoops to jump. Like it's not as easy as just putting up some drywall and putting a
A second kitchen.
yeah, putting another kitchen in the basement, right? Like you can do that, but it's not a legal suite. And if you're going to sell it as an investment and you want the suite to be legal and permitted and everything, like people don't understand the requirements for fireproofing and soundproofing and egress and safety and everything that needs to go into making a suite legal now. And it is a pretty hefty premium over just having an in-law kitchen in the basement and having that little bit, maybe you're renting it to your cousin or something, who knows. But if you're having that as an investment property and having all of the permits and everything inspected and in place and evaluated by the city, it adds a lot of costs. And I wouldn't, it's from what I've seen, it's almost better for most people if they're interested in buying a place that has a basement suite in it, buy
Yeah.
one that's already done. Buy one
Yeah.
somebody else already made legal, and you'll be better off in the end. So,
Yeah. And if I could transition, North Side really has that appeal. Like you're not going to feel like you're priced out. You can live in a lovely home, a lovely neighborhood, and have that be a benefit and have it be something you can have as a goal. But it's interesting how when you move to the suburbs, the outerlying parts of the community, and you can see these builders are building these huge 3,000, 4,000 square foot homes. And then they're putting in, we have a legal suite in the basement. There's twofold. It's easier when you're building from scratch. There's a
absolutely.
lot less hoops to jump through. But secondly, they're doing that because these people buying this massive home don't need the space, but they do need the income because they're living sometimes above their means of rationality, right?
Right.
So that gauge on the north side, the one thing I like about it is you often find people who are much more financially savvy with living within their paycheck and within their means of savings, as opposed to living for, I'm going to make more money 5 years from now. I better just buy that house now. And then I don't have to grow into it. I'll just, I'll be able to afford it more when I'm in a better position, but I can make it work today. So let's do
Mm-hmm.
it. So there's actually that relationship. I just, helped a couple buy their retired in their 60s and they sold their acreage. And as a good example, buying in that community in Kensington, they couldn't believe they could now enjoy another private home that was in the city, less work than an acreage, but now they don't have to rent. And so they were rather excited that they could actually have their own place again. And so that was an interesting transition too, that it was very desirable even for people who are retired to live in that community.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Chris. Think we're getting towards the end here. Is there anything you wanted specifically to talk about before we sort of wrap things up here?
No, I think we've gone over a lot of stuff here, Trevor. I just want to say thank you for having me on and for getting a chance to have this discussion with you. Today's day and age, we're doing so much more to try and meet people face to face and get to know people. And that's really hard to do over the phone and email. So I'm just excited that we got a chance to do something like this on the Zoom call and a video for people to see.
All right, great. And if people want to get a hold of you and talk about buying or selling a house or get some market advice, where do they get a hold of you at?
Absolutely. So, of course, Chris Miller and Remax Elite is two easy Google searches you can pop in there, Realtor in Edmonton. But you can also, I'm sure that we could give you the link to my website. I like to do a little SWOT analysis, we call it, building people's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats when we're doing a consultation. So,
Mm-hmm.
my website, very easy to remember, property SWOT, SWOT.ca.
Okay, propertyswat.ca, right?
Mhm.
Okay, great. And we will for sure link that in the description below. So if anybody's looking, we'll get Chris's contact info in there and when this goes up. And great. All right. Thanks a lot, Chris. I really appreciate you taking the time, and we'll be in touch again soon. I hope everybody has learned something now about the real estate market north of the Yellowhead. All right. So thanks again.
Excellent. Have a great day, Trevor.
You too. Bye-bye.